Code Explained says hi. Today we're going to talk about all the 34 string methods in JavaScript, and in one single video. Well, the first thing we're going to do is talk about the string object in JavaScript. Well, first, to create a string in JavaScript, you can use double quotes or single quotes or the backticks, and then your string value inside. Then you can assign this to a const or a variable. Well, when you create a string this way, this is a string primitive. This means that this is a primitive value. So this const here, your string now, is not an object. So it doesn't have any properties or methods. While when you create a string using the string object along with the new keyword, and then pass in as a parameter or argument your string value, in this case, when you assign this to a const or variable, then str1 here will be an object. It has some properties and methods. Well, actually, also when you create a string primitive, so when you create a string this way here using the backticks or single quotes or double quotes, JavaScript will automatically convert your string to a string object. So it doesn't matter whether you're creating your string this way or using the string object. At the end, you're going to create a string object that has many properties and methods. Well, specifically, the string object has one only property, which is length, and lots of methods. Some of them are still in the experimental state or phase, and some are deprecated. Well, we're not going to cover these, and this leaves us with 34 methods in total. Well, let's go and talk about the property length. Well, first, I'm going to ask you to show some support for the channel by liking, commenting, sharing the video, and also subscribe if you didn't already subscribe. Well, if you want to show more support, you can join the channel, buying me a coffee, or PayPal me. You'll find the links in description. Now let's go and talk about the length property. Well, if you go and create a string and then assign it to a const or a variable str. Now, if you have, for example, a text editor like VS Code, when you say str then a dot, VS Code will suggest all the properties and methods you can access for the string object. Now, if I say str.length, now I can access the property length of our string here. Now the length property here is basically how many characters are in your string. So for example, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then 14. So the length of my string here is 14. So simple. And now something I want to discuss before we dive into the methods is how to access a string character. So sometimes you want to access a specific character in your string. So for that, you need to use your string as if it were an array. So you need to say string, then open the square brackets, and then inside the index of the character you want to access. So strings are like arrays, they are also zero index based. So this means that the first character in your string index is 0. So for example, if I say here string, then the square brackets and then 0, the index, this will return the character C, the first character in our string. And if I say string, then the index 5, this will return 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the character E in this case. And now sometimes you want to access the last character in a string. In that case, you need to use the string.length. But the string.length here is 14, and because this is 0-based index, so the last character's index is 13. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, which means that the last character's index is all the time for any string is the string.length minus 1. So in this case, this will return the last character, which is T. And that's how you can access the last character in a string. And now let's move on to the first string method in this tutorial. The first method is charAt, and this is used to access a single character in a string. For the syntax, you need to say string.charAt, and this takes in a single parameter, which is the index of the character you want to access. Let's see some examples. If I have a string, then assign this to a const string. Now you can access a single character using the square brackets like we saw before. So if I say string, then the index 5, this will return the character E. Now the same thing goes for the charAt, so I just need to say string, my string here, my const string, then dot charAt, and then I need to pass in the index, for example 5. And this will return the character E, the same result we got in this example here. And that's how you can use the charAt method to access a character in your string. And now let's move on to the next method. Now let's talk about indexOf and lastIndexOf. Now for the syntax, it's really simple. We just need to pass in the search string as the first parameter. And the same thing for the lastIndexOf. Now indexOf and lastIndexOf, they both return an index, the index of the search string passed as the first argument. But there is a difference between indexOf and lastIndexOf, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. Now let's see some examples. So we have here a string, the code undefined code. So this is like a stupid string, but it's really going to be helpful to understand indexOf and lastIndexOf. And now I'm going to go and separate all the characters so I can give them their appropriate indexes. Now I'm going to go also and grab these words here and give them their indexes. So the indexes of the first character of each word. So for example, the word the has an index or starts at index 0. Code, the first occurrence of the word code, has an index 4. Undefined, the index 9. The second occurrence of the word code starts at 19. And the last occurrence of code is at 24. And now let's go and see some examples for indexOf and lastIndexOf. So I'm going to use my string here as, and then I'm going to call indexOf. I'm going to pass in code with capitalized C. Now, code with capitalized C doesn't exist in my string, it's not found. So indexOf will simply return -1. So indexOf is case sensitive. Now if I go and do the same with lastIndexOf, I will also get a -1. So they both are case sensitive. And when the search string doesn't exist in your string, they both return -1. Now let's go to the second example where I call indexOf with the search string code, lowercase, and I'm gonna do the same thing with lastIndexOf. Now indexOf will start from the left here and look for the first occurrence of code. So it will look for the first occurrence. And lastIndexOf here will go and search for our search string starting from the end to the left. So in this case, lastIndexOf will return the index of the last occurrence of our search string code. Now the first occurrence of code for indexOf is at 4, so it will return 4. And for lastIndexOf, it will start from the end, and the last occurrence of code index is 24. And now I'm going to go and talk about the second parameter for our indexOf, which is the position. So this is an index from where you want indexOf to start searching for your search string. The same thing for the lastIndexOf, the second parameter is position. And that's again an index where you want to start the search for the search string for your lastIndexOf. So by default, if you don't pass the position parameter here, so for indexOf, position is going to be 0 by default. But for the lastIndexOf, if you don't pass in the position here, the position by default is going to be +infinity. So indexOf will always by default start from 0, looking for the first occurrence of the search string, and the lastIndexOf will start from +infinity and searching for your search string. Now let's see an example. So I'm going to call indexOf and search string is going to be code, and I'm going to start at position 4. So we're going to start now from here. Now indexOf will look for code starting from 4, and it happens to be that code also starts at 4. So the first occurrence of code here, index is 4, and 4 is greater than or equal to the position. So in that case, indexOf will return 4. But if I use, for example, 5, now the first occurrence here of code, index is 4, and 4 is not greater than or equal to 5, so it won't take this code into consideration. So it will go and start now from 5, and now the first occurrence of the word code happens at 19, so it will return 19. Now the same thing for lastIndexOf. If I pass in 24, so now it's gonna start from 24 and then going back to the left looking for code, but it happens to be that code here index is at 24. So the index of the occurrence of the word code here is 24, and 24 is less than or equal to 24 the position, so it will return 24. So for the indexOf, we're looking for the search string that has the index greater than or equal to the position, and for the lastIndexOf, we're looking for the index of the search string that are less or equal to 24. And now if I go and use 23 as the position, now this occurrence here of the word code, index 24 is not anymore less than or equal to 23, so this occurrence here doesn't meet the criteria. So now we're going to the left looking for the word code, and it happens to be this one here that has the index 19. So in this case, this will return 19. So the last occurrence of the word code starting from 23 for the lastIndexOf is 19. And now I'm gonna go and try a negative number for the position. So whenever a position is a negative number for indexOf, position will behave like 0. So now you can think of this like if it were 0. So now indexOf will start from 0 looking for the first occurrence of code. This means that it will return the index 4. And now the same thing for the lastIndexOf. If I pass in a negative number for the position will be also 0. So now lastIndexOf will start from 0, going to the left looking for the word code. Well, apparently it doesn't gonna find it, so it will return -1. And now I'm gonna go and search for the index of an empty string, and indexOf here will go and start from 0 looking for an empty string. Well, empty strings are everywhere in your string, so whenever you look for an empty string, for example, if you look for an empty string at 10, there is an empty string, at 19 there is an empty string, so empty strings are everywhere. So indexOf will return 0 because there is an empty string at 0. And also if you're looking for the last index of an empty string, in this case you're gonna get 30 because there is an empty string after 29. And now for the last example, I'm not gonna pass in any parameter, so now search string is undefined, and I didn't actually expect this to happen. So indexOf, when search string is undefined, will actually go and look for the string undefined inside your string. So the first occurrence of undefined in our string here is 9, so this will return 9. So if, for example, your string doesn't include the word or the string undefined, in that case this code here will return -1. The same thing for the lastIndexOf. If you don't pass in the search string, so now it's going to be undefined, and lastIndexOf will look for index of the last occurrence of undefined. So in our case here we have only one undefined, so it's going to return 9. And that's it for indexOf and lastIndexOf. So let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about slice and substring. So these two methods here extract a section of a string and return it as a new string. So they don't change the original string. The syntax is simple. The first parameter for slice is indexStart, and the same thing for substring. The first parameter is also the indexStart. So the indexStart is the position from where you want to start taking a slice from your original string. Let's see some examples. So I have here a string, the morning is upon us, and I'm going to assign this to a const s. And the string length here is 23. Now I'm going to separate each character and then give them their associate indexes from left to right and from the end also. So these are their associate indexes from the end. Now if I go and call slice on my string s and then I'm going to choose random index, for example 12, so slice will go now and take a slice starting from 12 to the end of this string. So 12 here is included. So we're going to see is upon us as the resulting string. Now the same thing for substring is going to do the same thing. So it's going to start from 12 included, to the end of the string, and it's going to return the same result. Now let's go and see some example where I pass in a negative number for the index start. For slice, it's going to go and count from the end, so -11. So it's going to start again from here. It's like starting from 12 to the end of the string. So it's going to return exactly the same result as before. But for substring, when the index start is a negative number, it behaves like it's 0. So any negative number is like 0 for substring. So it's going to start now from 0 to the end of the string. So we're going to get the whole string. So that's the first difference between slice and substring. And now if I pass in the length of the string, 23 here, then an empty string is going to be returned by slice. And the same thing is going to be returned by substring when it takes in the length as the start index. And now let's go and talk about the second parameter for slice, which is the indexEnd. The same thing for substring, it also takes in a second parameter, which is indexEnd. So now you can choose the index start and the indexEnd of the section you want to extract from your original string. Let's see an example here. So I'm going to pass 13 and 16 random indexes. So slice here will go and start from 13. 13 is included, but 16, the indexEnd, is not included. So I will get just s, the space, and u. And now for the substring, it's going to be the same thing. So it's going to start at 13, but it's not going to include 16. So we're going to get the same result. Now if I go and swap these two indexes, so I give 16 for the index start and 13 for the indexEnd. So for slice here, it's going to return an empty string. But for the substring here, if the index start is greater than the indexEnd, it's going to swap them. So it's going to start from 13 and end at 16. So we're going to get the same result as before. So that's the second difference between slice and substring. And now if I go and use -8 as the index start and -4 as the indexEnd, so slice will go backward and start from -8 and then stop at -5, so -4 is not included. So I'm going to get upon for the resulting string. Now for the substring, if I gave -8 as the index start and -4 as the indexEnd, remember substring doesn't take in negative numbers, so this will be 0 and this also will be 0. So it's going to start at 0 and end at 0, which means it's going to return an empty string. Now if I use a negative number for index start and a positive number for indexEnd, now slice will go and start from -8, but 4 is before -8, so it's going to return an empty string. But for the substring here, if I give it a negative number for the index start and 4, now here it's going to be 0 till 4. So it's going to start at 0 and then end at 3. 4 is not included. So we're going to get the and then the space. And now if I call slice with a positive number for the index start and a negative number for the indexEnd, so it's going to go and start at 8. So 8 is included, but -4 is not included. So we're going to get ing is upon. So that's the resulting string. But for the substring here, so 8, then -4. So -4 is going to be 0. So now it's going to start at 8 and then end at 0, and because 8 is greater than 0, it's going to swap the two indexes, so it's going to start at 0 and end at 8. So 0, then 8, 8 is not included, always the index end is not included, so we're going to get the space mourn. And that's how slice and substring methods work. So now let's go and move on to the next one. And now let's talk about split. So split is used whenever you want to divide your string into substrings based on a separator you pass into the split method. And a split method will return those substring ordered inside an array, then returns the array. So it doesn't modify the original string. Let's see the syntax here. So you can call split on your string without any parameters. Let's see what's going to happen in that case. Let's see some examples. So I have here a string, and then if I call string.split method and assign this to array0 a const, because split will return an array without modifying the original string. So here, because we don't have any separator, no split will happen, because we didn't pass nothing to our method split. So no split will happen here. So it's just going to return an array and then inside one single element, which is our original string. Now, if you pass in a first parameter, that's going to be the separator, and that's where your split method will divide your string. So if I go and pass in a space as the separator, so on each space here, that's where the splits will happen. So I'm going to get an array. So I'm going to get the first word here, then the split will happen on the space. Then I'm going to get morning, and then is, because I have here this space, then upon, and then as. And you can see here we don't have this space anymore. So take in mind that the space or the separator in general is not included in your substrings. Now I'm gonna go and use an empty string. So when you use an empty strings are everywhere. So you're just gonna get all the characters separated inside an array. Now if I go and call a split with O, for example, as the separator, so I'm gonna split my string here on O's. So the first string or the first substring will be this section here, so the M, and then the second one will be this on is up, and then the last one is going to be N as. Now you can see again that O is not included in the substrings because the separator is not included. And now let's talk about the second parameter, which is limit. So limit here means that you want to limit your number of splits to a given number. So for example, if I call split with O as the separator and then the number of limits 2, so this will return just 2 or the first 2 splits. And now if I call it with 0 as the limit, this will return an empty string. And that's almost everything about the method split. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about includes. So includes is used whenever you want to see or determine if your string is found within another string. So for the syntax, you want to call includes on your original string and then see if the search string is found inside or within the string here. Now let's see some examples. So I have here a sentence. So this is my string. I'm going to assign it to sentence. So now I'm going to go and call includes on my sentence to see if my sentence includes a given string here. So for example, I'm going to use fox, and now because my sentence includes fox, this will return true. Now if I call includes with fox with F capitalized, this will return false. This means that includes here is case sensitive. Now includes may also take in a second parameter, and that second parameter is called position. And the position here is the index you want to start from, checking if your string includes a given search string or not. So for example, if I use 0, this means that it's going to start from the beginning of the string, and this of course will return true. because from the beginning it apparently includes fox. Now if I use the position 16, so here I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So f is at 16 here, so this will return true because starting from 16, my sentence here includes the string fox. If I use 17, so this will start from O, this will return false. And that's it for includes. Let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about startsWith. StartsWith is used whenever you want to check if a string starts with another string or not. So let's see some examples. So I have here a string. Now I'm going to check if my string here, cats are the best, starts with cats. Of course it starts with cats, so if I assign this to result will be true. So if I use cats here with a c, a lowercase c, in that case this will be false because starts with is case sensitive. Now if I go and check if my string starts with r, and my string doesn't start with r apparently, so this will return false. Now startsWith takes in a second parameter called position. So position here as an index you want to start from checking if your string starts with another string or not. So for example here r starts at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I go and check if my string starts with r at position 5, this will return true. And now let's talk about endsWith. So endsWith checks whether a string ends with another string or not. Let's see some examples here. So I have the same string, and this time I'm going to check if my string ends with best with the exclamation mark. So in this case the result will be true. And now if I go and check if my string ends with best without the exclamation mark, this will return false. Now the method endsWith also takes in a second parameter and it's called length. For startsWith we call it position, and for endsWith is length. They are different. Now the length here means the length of your string. By default, if you didn't pass in a length parameter, by default it's going to be the string length. For example, this string is 18, so in both our examples, in both the two examples here, the length is set to 18. Now if I go and set the length to 17, so endsWith will take just this part of the string. So the last word will be best without the exclamation mark. So here I have 1, not 0, because this is not an index, this is a length. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's like my string ends at t here. Now if I call endsWith with the length 17 and check if my string here ends with best or not, this will return true. And that's it for startsWith and endsWith. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about concat. So concat is used to concatenate strings. So it's like doing addition in numbers. Now we can do addition in strings. The syntax is simple. You want to call concat on a string and then pass in another string as argument. Now concat will concatenate the string 2 to the string 1 and returns a new string. So it doesn't modify any of these two strings here. Let's see an example here. So I have my string 1 which is equal to hello and my const string 2 which is equal to world. Now if I call concat on string 1 then pass in string 2 as argument, this will concatenate two strings. It's like doing string 1 plus string 2. This will return a new string. I'm going to assign it to a const greeting, and greeting now will be equal to hello world without any space here. So now you can also go and concatenate more than one string to another string. So now I can go and concatenate a space here and then my string 2 world to my string here 1 hello. I'm going to assign this to greeting, and this time it will be equal to hello world. So hello, this is The string 1, the space is this space here, and string 2 is world. Now you can also concatenate more than 2 strings to another string. Now instead of concatenating strings with concat, it is recommended that you use the assignment operators. So for example here, instead of doing string1.concat, you can use the addition operator string1 plus an empty string plus string2. That's because the addition or the assignment operators are way faster than the concat method. That's it for concat. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about repeat. So repeat is used whenever you want to do more copies of a string. So whenever you want to repeat a string, the syntax is simple. You want to call repeat on the string you want to do more copies of, and then the number of copies you want. So this is called count. Now let's see some examples. So I have here a string ABC. I'm going to call repeat. I'm going to pass in 0 as the count here. This will return an empty string. Now if I go and call abc.repeat with count equals to 1, this will return abc repeated 1 time. Now if I call abc.repeat with 2, this will return a string with 2 copies of the original string. By the way, repeat doesn't change the original string, it returns a new string. And now if I call repeat with 3.5, repeat will convert this number to an integer, so this will be 3. So the ABC here string will be repeated 3 times. Now if I call abc.repeat with -1, this will return an error, a range error, because count must not be a negative number. Then if I call repeat with 1 divided by 0, I will also get a range error because 1 divided by 0 is infinity. So count must be an integer greater than or equal to 0. It must not be a negative number or infinity. And that's it for repeat. Now let's move on to the next method. Now let's talk about trimStart, trim, and trimEnd. So these methods here are used whenever you want to remove white space characters from the start and the end of a string, or from the start or the end of a string. The syntax is simple. You need to call trim on your original string, or trimStart and trimEnd without any parameters. Let's see some examples. So I have here a const greeting. There is a string. This string here has a white space in the start and white space at the end. Now if I call trim on greeting, trim will not change the original string. Instead it's going to return a new string. So I'm going to assign this to a const str. Now this const here will be equal to hello world with the white space at the start and at the end both removed. Now when I call trimStart on greeting, this time this will remove just the white space characters from the start of the string and leave in any white space characters at the end. And then when I call trimEnd on my greeting string, this will only remove the white space characters at the end of the string here. So this is what I will get. Now when you call trimStart and trimEnd on a string that doesn't have any white space characters at the end or at the start, they won't remove any white space characters and they won't throw an error. They will just like return the original string without any changes. So it's like making a copy of the string. And that's it for the trim methods. Now let's move on to the next method. Now let's talk about padStart and padEnd. So these two methods here are used whenever you want to pad a string, your original string, with another string to reach a given or a target length. Now for the syntax, you want to call padStart on your original string and then pass in the target length. For example, your string length was 5 and now you want to pad your string from the start till it reaches the target length, for example 10. Now the second parameter will be your pad string. So this is the string you want to pad your original string with till it reaches the target length. And the same syntax goes with padEnd here. Now let's go and see some examples. So I have here a string ABC. Its length is 3, so 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to call padStart. I'm going to pass in target length 10. Now because I didn't pass the second parameter padString, the padString here by default will be a space. So now my ABC string here will be padded from the start till it reaches the target length 10 with spaces. And this is what will happen here. So my ABC string now will be padded from the start using a space because I didn't pass in padString here, the second parameter. Now it's gonna keep padding the string with the same padString, the space, multiple times till it reaches 10. So this will keep happening till my string reaches 10. And now the same thing will happen with padEnd, except this time the pad will happen from the end. So my string here ABC will now be padded with spaces from the end till it reaches the target length 10. Now let's go and see an example where I pass in a padString. So I'm gonna pass 10 as the target length and then foo my padString. So now my ABC here string will be padded with foo the string or the padString. And now because my string here didn't reach the target length, which is 10, so we have here just 6 for the length, this will keep padding my string with the same string multiple times till it reaches the target length. So this will go and pad the string again with the same padString foo, and now my string here reached 9 for the length, so we still have just one character to reach the target length 10. So in this case, we're just gonna go and pad the string here with the first character of padString, which is F, and that's the resultant string. Now the same thing goes for padEnd. I'm gonna use the same arguments here. So this time it will be padded from the end. Now let's go to another example where I pass in a long padString here. So if my original string was padded with this string here, it will go over my target length. So in this case, what padString will do, it's gonna go and truncate this string here. So when padding our string ABC, it will reach 10, the target length. So now I only pad the string ABC with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 without the last character here 8. The same thing goes for padEnd. The difference, it's gonna happen from the end. So it also truncates the string, the padString, to reach the exact target length. Now for the last example, I'm gonna use a target length that is less than the original string length. So here we have 3, 2 is less than 3. So in this case, what padStart will do, it's just gonna go and return your original string. The same thing goes for padEnd. When you use target length less than your original string length, it's just gonna go and return your original string. And that's it for padStart and padEnd. Let's move on to the next method. Now let's talk about localeCompare. So localeCompare is used whenever you want to compare two strings. So for example, a reference string and a compare string you pass in as the first parameter. Let's see some examples on how localeCompare works. So if I have a reference string that occurs before the compare string, for example A and B, if I call localeCompare on A and then pass in B as the first parameter, localeCompare will return a numeric value. In this case, it will return a negative number. So for some browsers, it can be -1, and for others, it could be -2 or even -3. So in general, a negative number when the reference string occurs before compare string. Now, when the reference string occurs after compare string, for example, B and A, if I call localeCompare, this time I'll get a positive number, +1 for some browsers and +2 for others, or even +3. And when the reference string is equivalent to the compare string, for example A and A, in this case I will get 0. So localeCompare compares two strings and it returns a numeric value, so a negative number when the reference string occurs before compare string, a positive number when reference string occurs after compare string, and 0 when the reference string is equivalent to compare string. So how do I remember this? Let's think about these as numbers. So for example, 1 comes before 2. If I do 1 minus 2, this will return a negative number. But if this was 2, then 1, so 2 occurs after 1, 2 minus 1 will be a positive number. So that's how we remember how localCompare works. Now, the second parameter is locals. So by default, if you didn't pass in locals, locals will be your browser's default language. For example, for me, it's going to be English, United States. So let's see some examples here. So I have here A with a normal mark, and I'm going to compare with Z. So in German, A starts before Z. So I'm going to get a negative number. But in Swedish, I will get a positive number because in Swedish, A starts after Z. So that's an example of how changing the locals changes the returned value from localCompare. And now the third parameter is options. This is an object you pass in to your localCompare. By the way, locals and options are both optional. So let's say an example here. So I'm going to compare again German and Swedish. So if I compare A with an umlaut with A, I will get a positive number. The same thing in Swedish, because in both languages A starts after A. Now I'm going to go and pass in options. So options is going to be an object. Options here, I think we have 6 options. One of them is sensitivity. I'm going to set to base. So this means that I want to compare A with an umlaut with A based on their base letter. Are they separate base letters or not? So I'm going to do the same thing in Swedish. So here I'm going to get 0, and here I'm going to get a positive number. Because in German, A has A as the base letter. But in Swedish, A and A are separate base letters. And that's it for localCompare. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about search. So search is used to search for a match between a regular expression and the string object. Let's see some examples here. So I have here a string that I assigned to a variable text. Now I'm going to go and call the search on my string object text. Then I'm going to pass in a string. But search here takes in a regular expression. So search here will go and convert this string here into a regular expression using the regexp object. Now I'm going to assign this to position because search will always return an index that is the index of the first match. Now the first match here happens or occurs at 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to get 5. Now I'm going to try search with a regular expression. So I have here some / and then n. So I'm going to search for A, I, and n. And this is the exact same thing as searching for the string n. So this will also return 5. Now if I go and look for n, now A, I, and n all uppercase, in this case I'm going to get 14. So this doesn't count as a match. So this means that search is case sensitive. Now I'm going to do the same search, but this time with the flag I, that means case insensitive, and this time it will look for both n uppercase and lowercase, so I'm gonna get 5 this time. So search here returns an index of the first match, and search is case sensitive. Now when search fails to find a match between your regular expression and the string object, it will return -1. And that's it for search. Let's move on to the next method. Now let's talk about match. So match is almost like the last method, which is search. So they both take in a regular expression, they both match the string against the regular expression. The difference here is that match will return an array with some informations about the match inside, and search returns the index of the first match that occurs. Well, when match fails, it returns null, and search, when fails, it returns -1. And now let's talk about what's gonna go inside this array here with some examples. So I have here the same string we used with the search method. Now I'm gonna call match on my string text here, and then I'm gonna pass in a string. Now the same thing again, because match and search takes in a regular expression, so they both will go and convert this to a regular expression using regexp object. Now I'm gonna assign this to a variable res, and this res now will be an array. So we said that match will return an array, and inside here I'm gonna get the match. So this is the match, and the index of the match, or where the match occurs. So the index is 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the input here, so the original string, and groups is set to undefined because we didn't use any groups in our regular expression. So that's the difference. Now for search, it only returns the index as a number. So if we use search here instead of match, we're gonna get 5 instead of this array here. Now I'm gonna go and pass in a regular expression. So this is the same thing as passing the string, because match will go and convert this string to this regular expression. So I'm gonna get the same result. Now if I call match with a global regular expression, in this case I'm gonna get all the matches without these properties here, index, input, group. So I'm gonna get just the matches that occurs in the string here. Now if I use the flag case insensitive, I'm gonna get the same result again, so just an array with the matches without these properties here. So the last thing is, when I use a pattern that doesn't exist in my string, we say that we're gonna get null. And now let's move on to matchAll. So matchAll is the same as match, except matchAll will return all the matches in a string, not just the first match in a string. The syntax is the same, so matchAll will take in a regular expression. Let's see some examples here. So I have the same string from before, and let's call matchAll on our text string here and pass in a string. Now matchAll will go and convert this string into a regular expression. So this is like calling matchAll with this regular expression. But there is one difference here. It's not just gonna go and convert this to a regular expression, but to a global regular expression. So that's the difference between matchAll and match. So match will convert this to a regular expression that is non-global, but for matchAll it will convert this to a global regular expression. Now I'm going to assign this to a variable res, result, and then this will be an iterator. So if you want to iterate over this, you need to use a for of loop. So for this, I'm just gonna go and spread res and then put this inside an array. Now I will get an array here as a result, and inside I will get all the matches, because this is matchAll. So I'm gonna get all the matches. So this is the first match. So if you remember, this looks like what we get using match, but this time we have all the matches. So each match here is an array. We have the match itself and then its index where it occurs. Then the input and groups. Here the second match happens at index 25 and the last one happens at 40. And now let's go and play with this. So I'm just gonna go and add this case insensitive. In this case, I'm gonna get the same results, except this will return now 4 matches here, because now this matches this regular expression here. Now, if I go and look for a pattern that doesn't exist in our string, I'm gonna get here an empty array. So when using match, we got null, but when using matchAll, I'm gonna get nothing here. And now for the last example, I'm gonna go and pass in a non-global regular expression. So this will return a type error. So matchAll must be called with a global regular expression. So if you pass in a regular expression without the global flag, in that case you're gonna get this error. And that's it for match and matchAll. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about replace. So replace is used whenever you want to replace a substring inside your string with another substring, or in general when you want to replace a match or all the matches of a pattern with a replacement. Let's see the syntax. So you want to call replace on your string object and then pass in as the first parameter your source string. So this is the one you want to replace, and this is the replacement here, the replacer string. This is the second parameter. So let's see some examples here. So I have here a string. So we have here the word blue that occurs here 3 times, and the first one here is with B capitalized. Now if I go and call replace on the text string object here, and I'm going to pass in blue, the first parameter, which is the source string. So this tells replace to go and search for blue and then replace it with red. So simple. So I'm going to assign this to result because replace doesn't modify your original string. Instead, it does the replacement and then return that as a new string. Now, if we take a look on the result, we're going to find the blue, the second blue here, has been replaced with red. So this is not a match, and this is the first match. So this is also a match, but replace will just replace your first match only. Now the replace method can also take in as a parameter, as the second parameter, a replacer function, so a function. So instead of using a replacer string, you can use a function, and inside your function you can do some logic, and then at the end you need to return a value, a string, that's going to be the replacer string. Now let's see an example. So I'm going to call replace, and then I'm going to go again and search for string, and then I'm going to pass in a function. Now this function here takes in as the first parameter the match itself. So here when we search for blue, this is the match. So now match here is exactly blue. Now what I'm going to do with blue here, I'm just going to go and uppercase it. So I'm going to use toUpperCase, a method we didn't see yet, but it's self-explanatory. So this will return blue uppercased, and that's going to be our replacer string in this case here. So if I take a look on result, now this will return this string here where the first match blue now is uppercased. Now the replace method can take in a regular expression instead of the search string. So you can go and use a search string if you want. So the replace will just go and search for that string inside your text. You can also use a regular expression with the power of regular expression. And then the second parameter is going to be the replacer string. So let's see some examples here. So I'm going to call replace, and then I'm going to pass in blue, and then I'm going to use the global flag here. And then the replacement is going to be red. So I'm going to assign this to result. Now because I used the global flag here, so this is a match and this is also a match. So replace will go and replace all these matches with red. So this is the string that we're going to get at the end. So the first blue here is replaced with red, and the second blue here is replaced with red. Now if I didn't use the global flag here, this is the one that's going to be replaced only. And now in the next example, I'm just going to go and play with the regular expression. So I'm going to add the case insensitive flag here. So this will go and replace blue here because now this is a match, and this blue here, and this also with red. And now you can pass in also a second parameter as a function when you use regular expressions. So I'm going to use the same function here, the same function we used in this case here. So I'm going to get the match and then uppercase it. Well, this function here can also take in some other parameters. You can go and look into the documentations and see what are those parameters. Now the regular expression I'm going to use here is blue again, with the global flag and the I flag. So again, this is a match, this is also a match, and this is also a match. So all these 3 matches now will now be uppercased. Well, that's it for replace. Now let's move on and talk about replaceAll. So just from the name here, you can know the difference between replace and replaceAll. So replace is used when you want to replace just the first occurrence of the match, and replaceAll will go and replace all the matches in your string. So the syntax is the same. So replaceAll takes in the search string as the first parameter and the replacer string as the second parameter. Let's do some examples here. So I have here the same string. I'm going to call now replaceAll with blue as the search string, and replace string is red. So because this is replaceAll, this will go and replace all the matches against blue here. So I'm going to assign now these two results. Now if you take a look on the return string, so we're going to find that this blue here, the first match is replaced, and also the second match is replaced. Now replaceAll can also take in a function as the second parameter, and that's called a replacer function. So I'm going to call replaceAll. Now the search string is here blue, the same examples we used with replace. So I'm going to call a function. Again, the first parameter is going to be the match itself. So blue is the search string. Now the match is blue. So this is the first match. I'm going again to uppercase it. And this time, because this is replaceAll, it's not going to go and replace this first match only. It's also going to replace all the matches as well. So this is what we're going to get. So the first match is now uppercased, and the second match is also uppercased. Now replaceAll can also take in a regular expression as the first parameter, and then the replacer string as the second parameter. So let's see some examples. I'm going to call replaceAll, and then I'm going to pass in a regular expression, but you must call replaceAll with the global flag. So you must always use a global regular expression with replaceAll. And now the replace string is red. So then I'm going to assign this to a result. Now the string result now will be this string here. So where all the matches now are replaced with red. Now in the next example, I'm going to play with the regular expression. So here I'm going to use the I flag for case insensitive. Now the matches are 3, so this is a match now, also this one and this one. So all the 3 matches now will be replaced with red. Now replaceAll can also take in a regular expression and a replacer function as the second parameter. I'm going to use here the same function, the same replacer function from before, and then I'm going to use this regular expression here. Now all these matches now will be replaced with the match uppercase. Well, again, for this function here, the replacer function, it doesn't take in only one parameter. It takes in more than one parameter. You can actually go and see the documentation for that. So you can do more advanced things with this replacer function. So this is just a simple or a very simple example of a replacer function. Now the last example here is when you use or when you call replaceAll with a non-global regular expression. So if you use this non-global regular expression with replaceAll, you're gonna get type error. So replaceAll here must be called with a global regular expression. So I think that's clear, and that's it for replace and replaceAll. Now let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about charCodeAt and codePointAt. So we're going to talk about the two methods and see the difference between them. So charCodeAt is a UTF-16 and codePointAt is Unicode. So they both take in the position of the character in a string, and they both return a UTF-16-bit code of that character. But for charCodeAt can only return the code for those characters that has a code between 0 and 65,535, and for codePointAt it can go and return the same code for those characters that are in this range here, but can also return the code for those that has a code that is greater than this number here. Well, to know the difference more about these two methods here, let's go and see some examples. So I'm going to use this string here. So we have here OK, then a space, then an emoji. If I ask you what is the length of this string here, you might say 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's wrong. So the length of this is 5. Why? Because, for example, here O is represented by a single UTF code unit. The same thing for K, the same thing for space. But for the emoji here is represented by two 16-bit code units. So it's like we have two characters here. And now for the position of each character here, so for O we have 0, K 1 and the space 2. Now the character starts at 3 and it's at 4 here. And now let's go and use charCodeAt and codePointAt to get the code for each of these characters here. So charCodeAt taking the position, and the position is simply the index of the character in a string. For example, if I put 0 in here, this means that I want to get the charcode of O capitalized. So this returns 72. Now if I use codePointAt and then give it the position 0, this will return the same code. So as long as the code of the character is less than this number here, charCodeAt and codePointAt will return the same result. So for example, if you're working with characters that doesn't have emojis, you can just go with charCodeAt. And now if I go to the position one here, so I will get the code for K here, which is 107. And then for codePointAt, we're going to get the same code. Now if I go for space at position 2, I'm going to get 32, and it's going to be the same result when using codePointAt too. And now if I call charCodeAt the position 3, now this is where the difference happens. So charCodeAt now will see this as a single 16-bit code unit, and it's going to return its code. But for codePointAt, it's not going to see this as a single 16-bit code unit. Instead, it's going to see it as two 16-bit code units. So it's going to return the compound value using the two 16-bit code units. So this is what we're going to get using codePoint. Now, if I use this code here to get an emoji, the emoji I'm going to get is this thumbs up emoji. But if I use this code here to get a character or an emoji, this is what I get. This is the broken character. And now let's move on to the fourth position here. So for charCodeAt, again, this is represented by a single 16-bit code unit. So it's going to return its code. And here codePointAt also will see this as a single 16-bit code unit, so it's going to return the same code as charCodeAt. And now if I go and use a position or an index that it's out of range because we don't have any character at the fifth index here or fifth position, charCodeAt will return none, and for codePointAt it will return undefined. Now if I use charCodeAt without any position, position will be set to 0 by default. So if I use 0 here, I will get the code for O, which is 79. The same thing for codePointAt. When the position is not passed, position is set to 0 by default, so I'll get the same result. And that's it for charCodeAt and codePointAt. Let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about fromCharCode and fromCodePoint. In the previous slide, we talked about charCodeAt and codePointAt, and we used those methods to get the code of a character. But now we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to get the string back from that code. So we can use a charCode to get a string, or we can use a codePoint to get a string. For the syntax is simple. You want to call fromCharCode on the string object. So this is not your string. This is not a string you created. This is the string constructor object. So you want to call fromCharCode and then pass in the code, an integer. So the charCode here. And also we need to do the same thing with fromCodePoint. So we're going to call that on the string constructor object. And then we're going to pass in a number which represents a codePoint. Now let's see some examples. But before, we use this string here with charCodeAt and codePointAt. So okay, then a space, then a thumbs up. And then we've said that O and K and the space are all represented by a single 16-bit unit. But for the thumbs up, it is represented by two units here. And that's why the length of this string is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the length. And when we call charCodeAt for each position here and codePointAt, they both returned 79 for O, 107 for K, and 32 for the space. So that's why we said charCodeAt and codePointAt will return the same result as long as the character is represented with a single 16-bit unit. But when a character is represented with a 2 units, that's when the difference between charCodeAt and codePointAt happens. So here, if I call charCodeAt position 3, I'm gonna get this code here, because charCodeAt will only return the code for this unit here, but for codePointAt will return the code for both the two 16-bit units. Now if we call charCodeAt position 4, we're gonna get the code for this single unit, the same thing for codePointAt. Well, that was a recap for charCodeAt and codePointAt. Now let's go and use fromCharCode and fromCodePoint with these codes here and see what we're going to get back out of those codes. So if I call fromCharCode with 79, this will return O. The same thing goes for fromCodePoint. If I pass in 79, I'm going to get O. If we pass in 107, we're going to get K, and then we're going to get K for fromCodePoint as well. Then 32, I'm going to get a space, and then for fromCodePoint with the 32 as the codePoint, this will return a space also. And let's move on to the next code here. So this code here for fromCharCode will return this broken character. If I call fromCodePoint with the same code here, that's where we're going to get a broken character. If I call fromCharCode with the last code here, I'm going to get again a broken character. And then if I call fromCodePoint, again I'm going to get the same thing, a broken character. And here you can see that fromCharCode and fromCodePoint, they both returned the same results for all these characters here. And that's because these characters here are all represented by a single 16-bit unit codes. So as long as a character is represented with a single 16-bit unit code, fromCodePoint and fromCharCode will return the same thing. So when I call fromCodePoint with this code here is the code for these 2 units here. This will return the thumbs up emoji. And now when I call fromCharCode with the same code, so this is out of range for fromCharCode, so it will go and truncate this and return this code here, which is again a broken character, I guess. So you can see here that when it comes to a code for 2 units, we got different results. Well, now let's move on and see some other examples. So fromCharCode here doesn't take in a single code. You can actually pass in 2 codes or more than just 2 codes for fromCharCode. And the same thing goes for fromCodePoint. You can pass in more than a single codePoint and get the string back. Well, let's see some examples. So I'm gonna call fromCharCode with 79. So this will return a single character O. If I pass in 107, I'm gonna get a string OK. If I pass in 32, I'm gonna get OK with the space. If I pass in this code here, I'm gonna get OK, then this broken character. But now if I pass in this code as well, I will get OK, then the thumbs up emoji. And that's simply because the thumbs up emoji here is represented with 2 16-bit units, and when I put them together, I get back my emoji here. Now let's go and do the same thing with fromCodePoint. So if I pass in 79, I'm going to get O, 107 K, and 32 a space. If I pass in this one, I'm going to get OK with this broken character. And then if I use the last one here, I'm going to get OK, then the thumbs up emoji. So the same results with fromCodePoint. But now let's say you're using codePointAt and fromCodePoint. So you've got these codes here, and now you want to use these codes here and get back your string. So if I call from CodePoint with 79O, 107OK, 32OK space, now this code here is a CodePoint for these two units, which means I'm gonna get back my thumbs up emoji. And now if I pass in this last one here, this will break my string and look like this, which doesn't make any sense because of this code here. Now we have broken our string. Basically what we need to do is when we called codePointAt here on the third position and got this code, we needed to skip this one here because codePointAt here returned the compound value of these two units here. So no need for looking for this code here. So to prevent this from happening, you need to prevent codePointAt from accessing the second unit of a character that has two, or that is represented by two units. So whenever it returns the code for the two units here, then you need to go and skip that unit and go to the next one if there is any unit. Well, you don't need to do this by yourself. You don't need to create the logic by yourself. You can use a library, a JavaScript library for string. For example, I suggest you use vocale.js library. And that's it for the methods from charCode and from CodePoint. Now let's move on to the next one. And now let's talk about normalize. But before we talk about the method, let's talk about why do we need it first. So Unicode assigns a single CodePoint for each character. For example, A, this is its CodePoint. But sometimes it assigns more than a CodePoint for a single character. For example, a C with the cedilla has this Unicode, so it's a single CodePoint. But then you can also use the code for C and code for the cedilla combined. You're gonna get this one here, this C with the cedilla. So in JavaScript, when I assign this code here to a string one, I'm gonna get this character here when I console log it. And then if I assign these two codes here, these two CodePoints to a string 2, I'm gonna get the same character. So both the strings here have the same visual appearance, but they don't have the same CodePoint. So when you go and compare these two strings here, you're gonna get false. And when you compare the length also, they're gonna get false because the length of the string number 1 is 1 and the length of the string 2 here is 2. This one has a character, a single character. This one here has 2 characters. And this is where the problem will come. So for an end user, this 2 here looks the same. But for your app, for example, they are not the same. So for example, if the user searches for this character and you're using this character, your app will not return the result your user was looking for. So that's why we need to use normalize. So let's talk about the syntax. So you can call normalize on your string, and normalize doesn't change your original string, so it will return a new string with the normalization done. Well, you can pass in some arguments here. If none was passed, this parameter here called form, Unicode normalization form, will be by default set to NFC. And this stands for canonical decomposition followed by canonical composition. You can also use NFD, that stands for canonical decomposition. Well, let's go and see some examples. So we have our strings here, string 1 from before and string 2. So when you render this, they will have the same visual appearance. So a C with the cedilla, a C with the cedilla. While this in the background, it's a composed from C and this cedilla symbol. So when I call codePointAt on my string 1 at position 0, because this one here has 1 for the length, so it has only 1 character, so codePointAt 0 will get us the CodePoint for this character here. So this will return 199. And then for this one here, I'm gonna call codePointAt0 and codePointAt1 because this has two characters. So at 0, this is the code for C, which is 67, and at 1, this is the code for the cedilla, which is 87 or 807. So you can see here again that this one here has a single code parent, and this one here is composed of two code parents, one for C and one for cedilla. Well, that's why we need to use normalization. So I'm gonna go and use NFC and NFD. So if I call string1.normalize without any arguments, in that case form will be by default NFC here, so I don't have even to pass in NFC. So NFC stands for canonical decomposition followed by canonical composition. What this means is that it will go and decompose this first, so this will then look like this one after decomposition, and then it will compose it, so going back to the character here, a single character. So if I then call string1.length, it will return 1. If I then call codePointAt0, this will return 199. Well, before we move on to string2, when we call string1.normalize, this will now actually change string1. I said that before, but actually it will go and return a new string normalized. But let's say that new string normalized is assigned to string1, so string1 now is overwritten. Well, let's move on to string2.normalize, and again, because I didn't pass in any arguments here, so by default form will be set to NFC. So decomposition followed by composition. So it will go and decompose this character, so it's already decomposed, and then do the composition. So composing this means that I'm gonna use another Unicode that will give me the same results as these two codes, which is this one here. So if I take a look now on the string2.length, I'm gonna get 1, which is not the case before doing the normalization. So here we have a length of 2, now we have the length set to 1. And then if I go and call codePointAt0, I'm gonna get the same code count here. And now you can see that my string1 and string2 are the same after normalization. So now if I check string1 equals string2, that's gonna be true. Now let's go and see the NFD, the example here with NFD. So if I call string1.normalize NFD, this means canonical decomposition. So it will go and decompose this, which means that my character here will now be represented with two code parents. So if I go now and call string1.length, this will return 2. And the same thing for string2. If I call length, this will return 2. I will see with the cedilla here, this string2 is already decomposed. After decomposition, it will keep the same length. So now if I call codePointAt0 on my string number 1, it will get 67. That's the code for a C letter. And if I call codePointAt1, that will return the code point for the cedilla symbol here. The same thing for string 2, codePointAt0 will return 67, codePointAt1 will return 807. And again, if you compare the two strings, string 1 and string 2, that will return true. Well, that's again some tiny examples of how normalize works. I hope this made you learn something new. Well, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and let's move on to the next method. Now it's time to talk about the two easiest methods in this series about the string objects in JavaScript, which are the toLowerCase and toUpperCase. So the syntax is simple. You want to call toLowerCase and toUpperCase on your original string with no parameters passed to the methods, both of them. So they won't change this string, the original string. Instead, they will convert your string into lowercase or uppercase and return it as a new string. So let's see an example here. So I'm going to use this string here, greeting hello world. You can see hello here is lowercase and world is uppercase. So I'm gonna call toLowerCase on my greeting string here, and because it doesn't change the original string, I'm gonna assign this to a new string, str lower, and then I'm gonna do the same thing with toUpperCase, so I'm going to call toUpperCase on my greeting string here, and then assign this to a new string strUpper. So if I take a look on this strLower, I'm gonna get hello world, all now lowercase. So you can see that world here is uppercase, but now it's lowercase. Hello was already lowercase, so it remains lowercase. And with toUpperCase, now I'm gonna get the whole thing now uppercase. Hello now is uppercase, world was uppercase, and it remained uppercase. And that's all about toLowerCase and toUpperCase. Let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about toLocaleUpperCase and toLocaleLowerCase. So we've talked previously about toLowerCase and toUpperCase. These four methods, in most of the cases, they will return the same results. But when using some locales, you're gonna get different results. Well, let's talk about the syntax. So when you call toLocaleUpperCase and toLocaleLowerCase on your string, this will do the conversion without changing the string, but actually returning the result as a new string. Well, you can call the methods with or without the parameter locale. The parameter locale can be a string representing the locale, or can be an array representing multiple locales. In case you pass in an array of locales, the best available locale will be used. Well, let's go and see some examples. So I have here a string Istanbul, the city. I'm gonna assign this to lower. Now let's see the results we're gonna get using different locales, English US and Turkish. So if I call toLocaleUpperCase with English US as the locale, and then assign this to a const upper, because we've said that this doesn't change the original string, so I'm going to get this result, Istanbul all uppercase, and that was expected. But now with Turkish here, because Turkish and some other languages, the case mappings are not the same as the default case mappings in Unicode, this is where I'm gonna get Istanbul all uppercase, but this I here, this I has a dot at the top. So we've got different results using different locales. And now let's go and see some examples with the toLocaleLowerCase. So I have here Istanbul uppercase. Again, I have this I with the dot at the top. Now, if I use toLocaleLowerCase with English US as the locale, now I'm gonna get Istanbul here. Although this I here has this dot at the top, I got the expected result. And then if I use Turkish as the locale here, I'm gonna get Istanbul lowercase as expected also. And that's it for the toLocaleUpperCase and the toLocaleLowerCase. So let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about toString and valueOf. Well, these two methods here are basically the same method. So you wanna call them on your string object, and they both are going to return the same result, which is the primitive value of that string object. Well, before we move on to the examples, I want to let you know that the toString and valueOf are both the string own methods. So they don't inherit from the object toString and the object valueOf methods. So if you're looking for the difference between the object toString and the object valueOf methods, this is not the right video. Well, now let's move on and see the examples. So I have here a const, I'm going to call it string object, because I'm not going to create this string using the quotes or the backticks. I'm going to create this string with the string object. That's why I called it string object. So I'm going to use here the new keyword with the string object, and then I'm going to pass in the value of the string, which is hello world. Now the string here has this value here, which is hello world, and also all the properties and methods of the string object. So if I go and console log the string object here, my const, into the console log, it will console string, so it tells me that this is an object, and also it has a value that I have passed in, which is hello world. Well, when I call the toString, I'm gonna get that primitive value, and also when I call string object that valueOf, I'm gonna get the primitive value, so the same result. So for the string object, toString and valueOf are basically the same method. Well, if you're wondering why do you need to call toString and valueOf in your code, I'm gonna tell you, you don't need to explicitly call toString and valueOf in your code, but JavaScript will internally call the two methods. So basically in JavaScript, you will never need to call the toString and valueOf methods by yourself. Well, that's it for the toString and valueOf methods. Let's move on to the next method. And now let's talk about the last method in this series. But first, let's see why we need this method. So let's see here a problem. So I have here a const file path, and it's apparently a string. The problem with this string is when I render it to a web page, this is what I get. And apparently that's not the result we were expecting to see. And that's because of these backslashes here. These are called escape characters. Well, I'm using VS Code and I installed this extension called Prettier. When I hit save, it formats the code. And this is what this string here looks like after formatting. So the first backslash here is gone because a backslash is an escape character. The second one here is colored and it's a carriage return. This one too, this is a new line escape character, and this one here is a form feed escape character. And that's why when I rendered this, I got this result. Well, to fix this, I had to add another backslash before each of these escape characters. So it can now see the escape characters as normal characters. And now when I render this to the web page, I get the result that I wanted to get. But this is not a solution because I had to type in those backslashes by myself. And that's why we need here the last method, row. Row is a static method. So you want to call this not on your string, but on the string object here. So the S here is uppercased. And then you're going to pass in the strings and then substitutions, as many as you want. But you don't need to use this syntax here because this syntax is used by JavaScript engine. So all you need to do is to put the strings and substitutions all along in a template string. So you're gonna start this with some backticks. The strings will be any strings inside your backticks, and substitutions are gonna be all the interpolations in your template string. So all the variables or JavaScript code you put in here using the $sign and the curly braces. So those are going to be the substitutions, and all the other strings are going to be strings. So you don't have to use this syntax at all. You just need to call string.row and then append to it your template string. And this is called a tag function. You could learn more about a tag function if you want. And I'm going to make a video in the future about a tag function. Now let's go and see some examples. Well, the rule says a string.row tag function with the escape characters like these and with the interpolations, like when you use a $sign and the curly braces and some JavaScript code inside, row will not process the escape characters, and that's by adding another backslash before each of the escape characters that are included in your template string. But for the interpolations in your template string, they will be processed. So if I call string.row, then some backticks here, I am, and then an escape character, then an interpolation or a substitution. So 10 plus 5 will be processed, but this escape character will not be processed, and that's by adding a backslash here. So if I assign this to a string 1 will be equal to this string. So I am backslash before the escape character, so it's not effective anymore, and then 15 because this has been processed. And now if you go and use the Unicode for an escape character, it's still not going to be processed. So now the string 2 here will be equal to this string here. So again, the interpolation is being processed, but this Unicode of this escape character is not processed. Well, if you use some variables or some const with some values and then call the string.raw with a template string that has the interpolations that calls those variables. Those variables will be substituted or replaced and be processed. So you can see the result here. Now if I go and say hi, then a backslash, then directly an interpolation. Now if you again have prettier and working with VS Code, so in that case this will be formatted like so. So the $sign will be turned gray, and then the color braces and whatever was inside will be now in yellow. Well, this depends on the theme you're using. But in general, the $sign will be escaped, so no interpolation here. So this will not be processed. So when I take a look on the string 4, I will find that the escape character is not effective and the interpolation is not processed. And now with the very first example we started with, so if I use here a file path, and now you can see we have here some escape characters. Now with the raw tag function, all these characters, all these escape characters will be escaped. So now if I render this to a web page, I will get the file path rendered without the escape characters being processed. Well, that's it for the raw method, and that's it for this series. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot of things in this series. Well, if you do, don't forget to like the videos and comment and share this with your friends. Well, don't forget to subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Take care and see you in a new tutorial.